모험이 시작돼 끝없는 약점 두근두근 내 심장.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President Yoon
South Korea's economy will grow.
the central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged.
Mission complete for Russian duties selfish.
Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030.
Arirang.
The political futures of President Yoon and South Korea hang in the balance, with the South Korean leader now facing a second impeachment motion vote over his martial law order. Will President Yoon survive another week? We head over to the National Assembly where our Lee Si-hu is standing by. Si-hu, how is it looking over there at the moment?
Yes, Tommy, we're starting to feel the air of tension ramp up at this place with less than just 2 hours remaining until the second scheduled vote on the motion to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. Since early this morning, the rival parties have each held closed-door meetings to discuss their final strategies ahead of the vote. Now, this last chance for discussion is all the more crucial for the ruling People Power Party, which up until this morning was still divided on whether to vote for or against the impeachment. Now, the discussion is still taking place at the moment as we speak. From what we've gathered so far, the party chairman Han Dong-un and floor leader Kwon Sang-dong are together in their decision to allow individual members of the party to freely participate in the vote. But they're clashing on the party consensus as Han Dong-un strongly pushes for the impeachment and Kwon pushes against it. The division in opinion is reportedly prevalent between the relatively newer members of the party who are leaning more toward impeachment and the senior members who've been in the parliament for a while and are generally leaning against it. It seems likely that their decision will continue right up until the vote at 4, but it's important to note that despite the ultimate decision of the party today, the voting this afternoon will be done anonymously, and whether the ruling party members adhere to the party consensus remains up to their individual will. Now, the key question today is, will there be enough participation and approvals from the ruling party for the motion to pass tonight? The impeachment motion requires at least 200 approvals from the total 300 lawmakers. This means the 192 members of the opposition need extra support from at least 8 ruling party lawmakers, that is, assuming full support from the opposition. So far, at least 7 ruling party members have spoken openly of their will to vote for impeachment.
So 7 out of at least 8 votes needed from the ruling party appear to have been secure. Now, where do the opposition parties currently stand then?
Right. So the main opposition Democratic Party, along with the other minor parties, still stand firm in their push for impeachment. The DP leader Lee Jae-myung this morning urged the ruling People Power Party lawmakers to exercise their voting rights and also and warned that the history will remember their decisions. The opposition lawmakers also went out this morning to encourage the people gathered outside the National Assembly and to thank them for their support for impeachment. Now, this time, the opposition took more time to strengthen the reasonings for impeachment, as stated in the motion, mainly the president's violation of his duty to safeguard the Constitution. Now, with more allegations added based on the questioning sessions and investigations that took place this past week. Soon, the DP that has led this process throughout will hold one final meeting at 3:30 this afternoon, right before the plenary session. They're expected to once again show their determination to pass the motion and share their final words ahead of the vote. Tami?
That was our Lee Si-ho live from the National Assembly. Thank you, Si-ho. Now, how does the voting procedure work at the parliament here in South Korea? Our Choi Soo-hyung explains.
On Thursday, all lawmakers from the 6 opposition parties again jointly submitted an impeachment motion against President Yoon to the National Assembly. According to the National Assembly Act, a vote on the motion must take place between 24 and 72 hours after being reported to the plenary session. The opposition has scheduled the vote for Saturday at 4 p.m. For the impeachment motion to pass, at least 2/3 of the 300 lawmakers must approve it. Currently, there are 199 lawmakers, including 7 from the ruling People Power Party, who support the motion to impeach the president. This means at least one more vote is needed from the ruling People Power Party for the motion to pass. 192 lawmakers from the opposition bloc are also still in favor of the motion, despite Cho Guk, the leader of the Cho Guk Innovation Party, losing his seat after he was sentenced to jail for academic bribery and fraud. He was succeeded by Baek Sun-hee, who is also in favor of impeachment. If the National Assembly approves the motion, the final decision on impeachment will then be determined by the Constitutional Court. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
So we are less than 2 hours away from the impeachment motion vote. We now go over to the Yongsan Presidential Office, and our correspondent Oh Soo-young is connecting with us. Soo-young, what's the mood there like as the president awaits the National Assembly's vote?
Good afternoon, Hami. It's quiet but watchful here within the office of the president as the Yoon Suk-yeol administration awaits the fateful vote by Parliament. And it's eerily quiet outside as well, with no traffic or crowds, as of course all the action will be taking place in Yeouido today. Well, the president's aides are known to be on duty, but of course they're keeping away from the media. Senior secretaries have been convening to discuss and also observe the developments today, and of course we'll be following up on the results of the impeachment vote when it takes place. As for President Yoon, it seems that he'll be observing the situation from his own residence in Hannam-dong, Yongsan-gu district.
Well, the last time we heard from President Yoon himself was back on Thursday, where he gave an almost half-hour televised address. Just briefly, Soo-young, let's go over the highlights of that speech and what this indicates about his position.
Right, Hami. So during his 29-minute speech on Thursday, President Yoon insisted that his move to impose martial law on the nation had been legal, and he was simply exercising his presidential act of governance. He said that it was the opposition that had incited unconstitutional moves. He said that he was moving to protect South Korean democracy from what he called anti-state forces, criminal groups, as well as national security risks such as North Korea and Chinese spies. Yoon mainly argued that for the past 2 years, the opposition has been moving to unseat him and members of his administration, as well as obstruct their major policies, making governance of the nation impossible. Then he insisted martial law was a political decision made legally under his executive authority. So his speech seemed to be an attempt to defend and justify himself as investigators close in on him on charges of possible insurrection. And as he said that he would fight to the end, this indicates that he would not resign, but rather face impeachment proceedings.
Then let's talk about the consequences for Yoon today. What powers would he continue to retain if he is or isn't impeached?
Well, if impeached, then President Yoon will get a notification from Parliament about their resolution to impeach him, and that would strip him of his presidential authority for up to 180 days that the Constitutional Court takes to make a ruling on whether to impeach him or not. And in his place, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will be acting as interim leader. It took about 3 hours for the notification to reach former President Park Geun-hye's office 8 years ago when she was impeached. And, well, only President Yoon's title as the executive would be retained, as a suspended president cannot exercise any powers, including diplomatic authority, appointment or dismissal of public officials, or command of the armed forces. The suspended president also cannot receive reports or give orders to public officials, such as the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers, nor can he attend National Assembly sessions. However, the president is entitled to protocol privileges, such as residing in the presidential residence, using official vehicles and aircraft, and receiving security protection. His office would also remain, with senior secretaries proceeding to answer to him as usual. On the other hand, if he is not impeached, then he would retain his title, but it's likely his credibility and ability to govern will be damaged, as investigations into his insurrection charges will continue, leading to his possible arrest. If he is arrested, the question then would be whether he's judged to be temporarily unavailable to perform duties, or whether this creates a vacancy in office. Now, if he's deemed unable to perform his duties in line with Article 71 of the Constitution, then the Prime Minister would take over as interim leader. But if his arrest is considered a vacancy in line with Article 68, then an election has to be called within 60 days.
Thank you, Soo-young, for your report today. We appreciate it as always. Now, in the meantime, South Korea's 2 highest-ranking police officials are now in custody, a historic first for the nation. On top of that, the chief of the Capital Defense Command has also been arrested. Our Kim Jong-sil has more.
South Korea's top 2 police officials were detained on Friday night in an unprecedented blow to the nation's law enforcement leadership. National Police Agency Commissioner General Cho Ji-ho and Seoul Metropolitan Police Chief Kim Bong-sik face charges linked to the December 3rd martial law crisis, with the Seoul Central District Court citing evidence tampering risks. Police revealed the 2 attended a secret meeting at a presidential safe house hours before the martial law declaration, where they allegedly received a control entities document from President Yoon Suk-yeol. Both say the document was destroyed or is no longer in their possession. They did not mention the meeting during the initial investigation, but later mentioned it during questioning. Authorities also accused them of blocking lawmakers from entering the National Assembly to prevent the vote to revoke martial law. Meanwhile, prosecutors arrested Capital Defense Command Commander Lee Jin-woo over the deployment of troops to the National Assembly during the crisis. Lee testified about a phone call from President Yoon during an interview with DP lawmaker Kim Byung-ju on his YouTube channel.
Did you receive any orders or phone calls from President Yoon Suk-yeol during the operation?
There was one instance. He called and asked the same thing. What is the situation there? I responded, it's very chaotic and our personnel can't even get in. He listened quietly and said, all right, before hanging up.
He further claimed that the first group of troops deployed to the National Assembly carried firearms as part of their standard equipment, but the second team only carried blank ammunition to help de-escalate tensions. However, despite these assertions, images showing soldiers carrying ammunition boxes have fueled public outrage and intensified scrutiny over the military's actions. As the investigation continues, high-ranking officials have been arrested, and authorities are increasingly focusing on President Yoon, raising serious questions about his involvement in the crisis. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
It's the second impeachment vote in the space of a week, and so much has panned out and been discovered during the past 7 days. Let's recap the past week with our Eun-ji. Good afternoon, Eun-ji.
Thanks for having me.
So, Eun-ji, let's rewind to last Saturday, exactly a week ago, when the first impeachment motion vote took place, but only to fail, right?
That's right, there has been overwhelming calls for President Yoon's resignation or impeachment as public outrage grows across the country. But last Saturday, the opposition party's motion to impeach the president failed to get enough votes after most of the ruling party lawmakers boycotted the vote. Most of them left the parliament before the vote even started, and only 195 votes were cast, below the threshold of 200. So the impeachment vote was scrapped without ballot counting. Announcing that a vote on the impeachment motion has not been established, National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik said it was very unfortunate that there wasn't even a vote. Take a listen.
The entire nation is watching the decision being made here at the National Assembly today. The world is watching. It's very regrettable that there wasn't even a vote on such a major national issue.
The main opposition Democratic Party has said it will not give up and has vowed to revive the impeachment motion every week. So eyes are now on whether the ruling party members will cast their votes today, and if more than 8 ruling party lawmakers will vote in favor of impeaching the president.
So President Yoon delivered an apology a week ago on Saturday on the day of the first impeachment motion vote. And then this past Thursday, he delivered another public address. Now, what was that about?
That's right. As you said, President Yoon apologized to South Koreans, but this week he said and it made it clear that he has no intention to resign, saying that he'll continue to fight the forces that threaten the future of South Korea. He appeared to try to justify his judgment on December 3rd, blaming the opposition party for repeatedly taking unconstitutional measures by abusing its powers. He said he was only trying to protect the country's constitutional order by exercising the president's powers within the framework of the Constitution.
그 목적은 국민들에게 거대 야당의 반국가적 패악을 알려 이를 멈추도록 경고하는 것이었습니다. 그럼으로써 자유민주주의 헌정 질서의 붕괴를 막고 국가 기능을 정상화하고자 하였습니다. 그 길밖에 없다고 판단해서 내린 대통령의 헌법적 결단이자 통치 행위가 어떻게 내란이 될 수 있습니까? 대통령의 비상계엄 선포권 행사는 사명권 행사, 외교권 행사와 같은 사법심사의 대상이 되지 않는 통치 행위입니다.
He also said he had no intention of shutting down the parliament, arguing that if he had intended to do so, he would have cut off powers and water supplies and restricted broadcast transmissions.
So President Yoon not stepping down voluntarily, but in the meantime, investigations into what exactly happened on the night of the martial law order are in full swing. And isn't he being targeted as a key suspect in the whole political drama, even as a ringleader, right?
That's right. Investigations into insurrection charges are now closing in on President Yoon, as the probes into key officials accused of enforcing martial law are picking up speed. The police investigation team has said it's not only seeking to summon the president for questioning, but is also looking into requesting an arrest warrant, as well as a search warrant for Yoon's residence in Central Seoul. During a press briefing by the police special investigation team on Friday, an official said that they're also considering requesting a warrant to seize the president's communication records. This comes after the police tried to raid the presidential office on Wednesday, but failed to get inside the building even with a search warrant after security guards refused to cooperate. After an hours-long standoff at the gates, the investigators had to leave and were able to receive only a limited number of documents through voluntary submission. Now, experts say that police will carry out a compulsory investigation into the president as they have deemed Yoon as a suspect based on the evidence they've gathered so far in a rare investigation into a sitting president for insurrection charges. President Yoon was placed under a travel ban earlier this week. And in the meantime, former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun has been arrested earlier this week after being named as the mastermind behind last week's failed imposition of martial law. Then on Wednesday, Kim was found by guards as he attempted suicide inside a detention center in eastern Seoul. His life is not currently in danger, and prosecutors have been questioning him over his involvement in imposing the martial law on December 3rd.
Well, Eunji, in a nutshell, the worst-case scenario for President Yoon for today is being impeached. But walk us through then who is in line to fill the potential presidential vacancy.
So Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will serve as the acting president of this country in the event of the impeachment passing. But Han was at the cabinet meeting just before Yoon's martial law declaration, and he has now been summoned for police questioning along with other cabinet members. Some opposition party lawmakers have even accused Han of being responsible for the martial law imposition. Although members at the cabinet meeting on the night of the martial law have said they were not able to stop Yoon's sudden course of action, criticism is inevitable since they were the last offenders who could have stopped the martial law declaration. So if Han is also impeached and is unable to serve as the acting president, next in line is the finance minister Choi Sang-mok, then the education minister Lee Ju-ho. However, there are concerns that if the prime minister is also suspended from his duties, it could lead to greater instability in the country's state affairs.
Definitely. Eunji, thank you so much for the thorough wrap-up today.
Thank you.
So President Yoon's legal troubles are far from over, with the insurrection charges closing in on the South Korean leader. Was his martial law order a pure act of governance or a clear act of insurrection? Let's turn to Professor Lee Hyun this afternoon. Good afternoon, Professor Lee.
It's good to be with you.
So let's cut to the chase. What President Yoon is arguing is that his order is not subject to judicial review like the exercise of diplomatic power. And I have to ask you, can this argument be justified?
Well, it can be to some extent, because the issue has been actually raised in the past in Korea that other instances where the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court have ruled that certain acts of the president are not subject to judicial review because they're wholly political acts. So as President Yoon sort of tried to make his defense of his position, like diplomatic powers or with respect to foreign affairs or the act of pardoning itself is wholly within the executive branch, and the courts cannot touch that kind of decision. So that's the real crux of the issue, is whether the martial law declaration really is in the context of a political act and essentially only reviewable by the legislative branch, which is the National Assembly. And because the National Assembly ruled and made a decision to lift martial law, President Yoon's position has some justification insofar as you view it only as a political act. But that's being debated hotly by constitutional scholars even today. And so that issue is being played out, I think you'll see in the weeks and months ahead.
Indeed. Another significant part of his argument is that a small number of martial law troops were deployed to maintain the order at the parliament. He has been emphasizing that it's not a riot. But what makes such deployment a necessary order in any way? Any legal guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, the point here is the Article 77 of the Constitution, which then provides for the imposition of martial law itself. And the Constitution makes very clear it's in the context of some sort of war, maybe armed conflict, national emergency. And so this is the question, is if the president deemed there to be a national emergency akin to a war or some armed conflict, then deployment of troops to the National Assembly could be justified. But I think that's the question here. Really, people are highly critical of the president because they don't look at the situation as being something akin to an internal conflict, which is armed conflict. So therefore, that's the issue really it's being raised, whether the troops are absolutely necessary for that purpose.
Well, on top of that, there are testimonies from military officers that President Yoon directly ordered them to drag people out from inside the parliament, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is this has been one of the disturbing kind of accusations, because there has been the accusation, although hotly contested by the presidential office, that no such order was actually given by the president. So that really goes to an evidentiary question as to whether or not that in fact happened. And so that's why we have these investigations ongoing. And that may be a question about whether or not he can be charged with insurrection.
Well, then let's say the vote is passed eventually within the day today, and the case goes to the Constitutional Court. Now, doesn't the Constitutional Court have 180 days to really deliberate and rule on Yoon's political future?
That's right. Normally, you would have, and this is pursuant to Article 38 of the Constitutional Court Act of Korea, that if a case goes to adjudication, in this case impeachment now, the court does have 180 days. But here we have a situation with only 6 justices on the bench. And so that 180 days doesn't actually kick in until you have an actual adjudication. So you would need 7 justices here, and then the time would begin for the 180 days. So at this point, because this is such an unprecedented event, we may see actual delays in the actual proceedings for the impeachment trial.
Right. The process leading up to the verdict could be quite a journey. One, because of how complicated the case is, and 2, because it's not just 1 or 2 people involved in the case.
Absolutely. There's this huge evidentiary issue here. And what the court is going to have to do is then be presented with all the evidence about what actually happened that evening. And then, again, is there a cause for impeachment here? So in this instance, then the question is going to be raised to the court about now introducing evidence. And because so many people were involved, it's going to take a while for this actual impeachment to actually occur.
Professor Lee, before I let you go, is there any way he is not impeached but still faces insurrection charges, or is such a scenario absolutely impossible?
No, you can have that situation because here the impeachment is a political sort of check and balance, whereas the insurrection charge, according to the Constitution, is a criminal act. So you can have, you might not have impeachment, but you could have the pursuit of criminal charges of insurrection because the Constitution permits it.
Alrighty, Professor Lee, thank you so much for your time and your insight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And large political rallies, both for and against President Yoon, are set to sweep across the capital city in the run-up to the impeachment vote this afternoon. One obvious rally spot is Yeouido, where the vote is taking place, and our Euni is there right now. Euni, it definitely looks a lot more crowded now compared to this morning, right?
Yes, Tommy, good afternoon. I'm still here at the National Assembly in Yeouido, where protests both calling for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment from office having been going on for the past few days. There are definitely more people now, and especially around here in National Assembly, I'm seeing most people calling for the president's impeachment. I'm also spotting a lot of young people, especially university students. And for the main candidate rally, I see people getting ready by buying different types of light sticks and taking spots on the ground in front of the stage, which is now all set up. Let's hear from some of the people who are here.
I was curious about how people are responding and how the rally is organized, so I decided to join. Seeing everyone actively participating and getting involved really warms my heart.
I came all the way from New York because I can't tolerate the policy where Yoon Suk-yeol is reportedly trying to target and harm our younger doctor colleagues.
I'm a student and I'll be joining a pre-rally with other students from my school at 1 p.m. The president's impeachment should have happened last week, so it's frustrating that it's been delayed by a week. I'm hopeful it will happen this week, but if not, I'll keep pushing and showing people that this is how we, the women in their 20s and 30s, feel.
Since the declaration of martial law, which lasted for 6 hours earlier this month, protests have spread across many cities in the country. The capital city of Seoul, large-scale protests are typically held at Gwanghwamun Square. However, martial law-related demonstrations and rallies calling for the president's resignation are mainly in Yeouido, which is where the National Assembly is located, while rallies supporting President Yoon are concentrated in Gwanghwamun. Here, around the National Assembly, organizations including the Korean Federation of Trade Unions, South Korea's largest labor union, will hold a candlelight rally scheduled to start at 3 p.m., where over 1 million people are expected to gather. Going over to Gwanghwamun, Party started holding a large counter-protest at 1 p.m. Organizers anticipate at least 100,000 participants. In addition, several other organizations in support of the president have announced plans to hold a rally near the National Assembly's main gate. Tensions are expected to escalate, particularly when the results of the impeachment vote are announced.
Benhee, if I heard you correctly, we are expecting over 1 million people to take to the streets across Seoul City. Now, how is the capital city preparing to brace for such a large crowd then?
Yes, Hami, in response today, there will be much stronger safety and response measures taken compared to last week. And at the moment, there are no major telecommunication traffics, but as the crowd grows, we may see similar problems like last week when people experienced some poor connections. And so, according to the Ministry of Science and ICT, major telecommunication companies are planning to deploy an additional 36 telecom base stations around crowded areas and establish nearly 40 temporary stations to handle the surge in telecommunication traffic. Those companies will also assign over 100 personnel for real-time monitoring and on-site support. Seoul City will deploy over 1,000 on-site personnel, including police officers and the fire department personnel, expand emergency medical teams, and use traffic and security CCTV to monitor crowd density. Additionally, with more students participating in recent protests, the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education has created safety response teams to prepare for any emergencies in crowded areas of Yeouido and Gwanghwamun. Nearly 200 personnel are stationed on-site before the protests began and will ensure that students return home safely afterwards. Seoul subway services on lines 5 and 9, which are the most used routes to reach Yeouido or Gwanghwamun, will also be increased.
That was our Uni live from Yeouido, just outside the National Assembly. And lit candles have been a symbol of protest here in the country, but now lights that you would usually see at concerts are taking the center stage at rallies now, functioning as something that unites the people. Our An Sung-jin has more.
Peaceful yet passionate, festive but serious. These somewhat contradicting words accurately represent the scene of recent political protests in South Korea. Candlelit protests had already garnered a lot of attention from the protests back in 2016. But following a then lawmaker's statement that candles go out when the wind blows, this time protesters found another way to convey their message: K-pop and light sticks. It's merchandise used by fans to cheer for their favorite idols. And with these, the atmosphere at these political rallies has changed.
What you're seeing behind is row after row of protesters with light sticks, chanting messages while singing along to K-pop songs. At night, the weather is well below zero, but the heat from these rallies is a powerful symbol that signifies solidarity.
A new protest culture has emerged, and it's being embraced by different age groups, but led by those in their 20s and 30s.
I felt bad that I didn't come immediately after the martial law declaration because of school, so as soon as it was over, I came straight away.
I'm in my 50s and I can really see that protests change a lot over time, which is touching. It's meaningful that a lot of young people have been leading these protests in a very peaceful manner, yet also being very vocal at the same time.
One expert says that K-pop helps give people a voice.
For these people, light sticks are a very precious item to them. The fact that they bring them out here means that they think of these rallies as a safe space where one can voice themselves while expressing uniqueness.
Alongside light sticks and chants, banners with quirky names or slogans were also there to demonstrate that it's ordinary people who are showing signs of support.
Last week's news was really shocking, the martial law announcement, and then I'm glad that it's all peaceful so far. No violence and no soldiers on the streets.
This non-violent method of protest is only one aspect of democratic citizenship, or a sense of civic consciousness despite the political turmoil. During these rallies, supporters were seen prepaying for meals or drinks at cafes and nearby restaurants. Though protests take place to express political dissent, the scenes of them instead show harmony, unity across generations, and consideration for each other. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
So, like our An Sung-jin just reported, what's prominent about these impeachment protests is that young women in their 20s and 30s take up a significant portion of the participation. What's motivating them to take the lead in these street rallies? Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
Young women are stealing the spotlight at the protests calling for the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. A noticeably large number of female protesters can be seen in the crowds, many of them passionately waving their LED light sticks in the air.
I do not want to see the country fall because of a few incompetent people.
Data from the Seoul metropolitan government show that at 4 p.m. on December 7th in Yeouido, where the first impeachment vote took place, the share of women protesters in their 20s was the largest, making up around 17.7%. On the other hand, male participants in their 20s accounted for only 3.3%. This comes as women in South Korea are increasingly voicing their opinions when it comes to politics, especially movements advocating for gender equality and social justice. South Korea's 4B feminist movement, centered on rejecting traditional societal roles for women, for instance, has taken social media by storm, and it was reported by media outlets such as the New York Times, The Guardian, and BBC News. While the 4B movement also faces criticism for its radical nature, it does reflect an emphasis on gender equality that's driving women's active participation in politics. In the country's last presidential election, President Yoon secured 58% of the votes of men in their 20s, but for women in the same age group, he garnered only 33.8%, largely seen as stemming from him downplaying systemic gender discrimination and pledging to abolish the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. While the ministry still remains, the position of minister has been vacant since February. The prominent presence of women in the protests signals a positive political and cultural shift in the country, with more collective action being taken towards social change. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And economic perception has not been so good amid the political risks at home and also risk factors beyond borders. Our Moon Hae-yeon tells us more.
The South Korean government has raised concerns over potential economic downturn risks, highlighting a decline in consumer and business confidence. That's according to the latest Economic Green Book, a monthly economic assessment report released by the Finance Ministry on Friday. The first report to be released since the martial law incident last Tuesday states that while inflation remains under control, growing domestic and international uncertainties could further dampen economic sentiment, raising the likelihood of economic risks contributing to an economic slowdown. The report reflects a darker outlook compared to the previous month, with the term gradual economic recovery omitted and replaced with concerns about growing uncertainty.
The only official data we have is on industrial activity from October, and there isn't enough preliminary data to make an accurate judgment about the current economic situation. We asked ourselves, what is the most accurate word to describe the current economic situation? We also reviewed past Green Book assessments from similar situations in the past.
Although terms like martial law or impeachment crisis were not explicitly mentioned, the government noted that the prolonged political turmoil is likely to cause households to tighten spending and businesses to slow down investment. The report also revealed weak domestic recovery trends, with private consumption up only 0.5% from the previous quarter in the third quarter of the year. Retail sales in October showed a mixed picture, with non-durable goods and semi-durable goods showing a rise in sales, while durable goods saw a significant decline month-on-month. Additionally, October's facility investment and construction figures showed negative growth, signaling persistent challenges in the economy. However, export performance remained stable, with November's exports increasing by 1.4% year-on-year. This marks the 14th consecutive month of positive growth. The government emphasized that despite geopolitical risks, global economic recovery remains intact, but further uncertainties, particularly in trade environments, continue to pose challenges. Moving forward, the government plans to maintain strong international credibility while reinforcing efforts to support economic stability and strengthen industrial competitiveness. During an emergency economic meeting on Friday, finance authorities reported a conference call with 3 major international credit rating agencies to note the strong fundamentals of South Korea's economy. Moon Hae-yeon, Arirang News.
So that's all we have at this hour, but Arirang News will continue to cover the second impeachment motion against the South Korean leader over his martial law order at 4:30 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.